determine relevance.
Running on Linux, but that's somewhere in the future.
Okay.
Yeah, so they announced a few weeks ago that they will introduce the full SQL Server product, where exactly what's in full is not yet defined, running on Linux, specifically Ubuntu and Red Hat, sometime in 2017. No, finer resolution on that. And they announced that essentially because to take the next step of customer engagement and get more feedback, they were going to have to engage significantly more people, and there was no way to keep it secret, so they decided they were going to go ahead and, disclose publicly that they were working on that.
Great.
Another aspect of our relationship is that SanDisk participates in a customer advisory council on the data platform, SQL Server. And so, we have extensive early disclosure on all of these kinds of things that let us, for example, we already have conversations with the SQL on Linux team and our data propulsion lab about how we're going to work together to test things. Unfortunately, we can't talk about that specifically. It's kind of like that old Fight Club thing,
Sure.
First rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club. But, as we can, weave into the conversation, that we have early disclosure and work closely with the product teams, all
alignment
of that,
with their roadmap and
it's
that kind of
true.
stuff.
So then the other question I had is, are containers part of your world, or is it still just all about virtual machines?
So containers in the Microsoft realm are a feature of Windows Server 2016. That won't release until September. And there was talk at one point that the SQL database engine would run within a container, but that appears to either not be committed or not going to happen. So that's a little bit up in the air right now.
Great, I'm ahead of everybody.
But I should
Containers
say,
are a nice
unclear
thing,
whether
but there
it'll
are
be supported.
limitations, and there's limited things you can do with them. So although you have containers out there, there's a lot of players in that, there's still limitations, security, and other things in them.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, and the big deal is containers is great for what they call DevOps, development and operations.
Sure.
Containers as a host environment for mission critical server applications, that's the part where there's still a lot of work being done and it's not fully baked. So, when we look at the intersection of containers and SQL Server, that takes you right to that part that isn't fully baked.
Just as a heads up, containers are a Linux variant typically, but very lightweight virtual machines. They don't have a lot of the bells and whistles, but close to free or very inexpensive. And so in some cases, like you said with DevOps, if you're just doing stuff like that, you really don't care about those added features, but you don't want to have to pay for the ability to do it in, let's say, a license with VMware, for example.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's the difference, with the Microsoft market is they're focused on the enterprise customer, IT, and, they want to see all those features and reliability and, mission critical readiness. And so they're just, that focus versus the Linux DevOps focus just take them in different directions.
Great, thank
Gotcha.
you.
Yeah. Okay, so here, IO Blender effect, we're just talking about how virtualizing workloads chops up IO requests. So even if you had a data warehouse workload that says, I want to read a whole bunch of data from the drive, in one nice, long, predictable read, like a gigabyte. And we just want you to read until you're done. Right? You start combining those because you have multiple workloads like that. And the I/O pattern, when it gets down to the hypervisor and to the storage system, is all chopped up like it ran through the blender. And so even sequential I/O, which external storage does a good job at, when it's been consolidated and virtualized, it feels like random I/O and crushes the storage system. And so this I/O blender effect and its impact on storage performance is usually the limiting factor in how many workloads you can put onto a host. And that's what these next slides are going to go into. So, move forward, please. There we go. Thank you. So here, it happens we're talking about a set of transactional workloads roughly modeled on the SQL Server 2005 transactional workloads, exactly the kind that most customers either have migrated or are about to migrate to SQL 2014 because Microsoft is ending the support of SQL 2005. So this is kind of a timely topic in that regard. So here, vertical is transactions per second times 1,000, and horizontal is the number of workloads running simultaneously. So you can see that right around 7 or 8 VMs, you have the peak performance, and then as you add more VMs, it starts to tail off. And so it's that competition between all the VMs puts a lot of stress on the storage system. And what we're looking at right there is 24 times 15K RPM spinning drives. And so this is a known weak area for spinning performance, is this kind of I/O pattern. Click again, please. So here, you have the same orange line on the bottom, and the top 2 lines are 2 different SanDisk solutions. And again, vertical means more transactions per second, and as you move off to the right, that's more VMs. And so whereas the spinning drives peak around 7 or 8 and then tail off, you see that the SanDisk solutions go out to 14 or 20 or 25. And, yeah, it's flattened out, but it's not declining. And so what that says is that you can put roughly 3 times more workloads onto the same host than you did with the spinning drives. Now, the gray line that's kind of in the middle there, that's the one where we use a FlashSoft caching software and the small I/O memory PCIe add-in card. But all the data still lives on the same spinning drives that are shown in that orange line at the bottom. The caching software and having the cached data run locally from that flash add-in card lets you get 3 times more workloads on that host, even though the primary storage is still the spinning drives. Okay, so for a customer who wants to, get more workloads on their host, more consolidation, but they don't want to change the storage configuration that they have, you install the caching software and that one I/O memory card, and you get 3 times more performance. The blue line at the top, that's using a bunch of flash memory. So there we had 2 times 6.4 terabyte I/O memory cards, and that makes the storage about the same as what we have in the spinning drives. And in that case, you see that not only do you get 3 times more workloads, that's the line extending off to the right, but you also get higher performance, which makes sense because in that case, all the data is on the flash card. The hard drives are not involved in that configuration. And so if the customer is willing to migrate their databases and their VMs off of whatever storage they're currently using and put it on the flash memory cards, you get that additional benefit out of it. So 2 choices, minimum change or maximum performance using the 2 different solutions.
Cool. That's a good story.
Peter, I'm curious, is there any relevance here for things like Intel VTC, which kind of queues up Ethernet traffic and tries to address some of the stuff from a networking perspective? Does any of that come into play here?
It would, and so this is some preliminary data. When we get the final white paper out, you'll see that the latency that goes with that top blue line is below 1 millisecond. And so anytime you introduce the network into the conversation, you get the full impact of the network latency, whereas because this is local storage, you get, sub 1 millisecond latency.
Yeah.
For the caching solution in the middle, that latency is right around 5 milliseconds, And so, again, that's typically going to be significantly below the latency for any kind of a network-based scenario.
Right.
And then finally, when we, have that's covered in the white paper, you see that as the latency increases, the CPU utilization plummets, and in a couple of slides, we'll talk about, the cost implications of that in the context of SQL Server per core licensing costs.
Mm-hmm.
So, anything you do to accelerate the network is overwhelmed by the latency inherent in the network. And therefore, it kind of takes you off into a very different performance profile. And the cost story we'll tell here in a minute would crush that network-based scenario.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a cool build. Okay, so we tested with about 21 workloads. Now, that was the rightmost value from the caching scenario. And so what we showed is that you could put all 21 of those workloads onto one host using either of the SanDisk solutions, or if you use the original hard drive solution, you'd need 3 hosts because that host only handled 7 workloads well. Well, if you've already bought 3 hosts, you've got 2 of them you can repurpose. And if you haven't bought 2 hosts, you don't need to buy those, right? You just buy the one. Okay? And then really the high impact part is that when you pay for SQL Server Enterprise Edition by the core in the CPU. And so, we'll step through and do the math here. So the hosts that we use for this testing each had 2 sockets, that is, it would hold 2 CPUs. Each of the CPUs we used had 14 cores, so that's 28 cores. Okay, click again, please. Okay, so SQL Server sells for not quite $7,000 per core. That's the full price, no discounts, no SA. So you do the math, 28 times 7,000 is not quite $200,000 of SQL licenses for each of those hosts. Right? So let's imagine the customer had budgeted for 7 workloads times 3 hosts, right? So 21 workloads. They were going to pay $600,000 for SQL licensing because it's $200,000 per host. So 200 times 3, $600,000. Well, we're taking 2 of those hosts off the table. So if they haven't bought their hosts yet, that's $400,000 worth of SQL Server licenses that they don't have to spend money on anymore because they just license up that one host, put 3 times as many workloads on it, and they're done.
Great.
So this is where the message. Go ahead.
No, I said that's a great story. That'll be a really powerful one to tell in the training.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'm wondering about that is if there's a workaround by using lower core count CPUs. That would help.
Yeah, if you reduce core count, so there's a bunch of knobs and dials you can massage here. So you can reduce the core count, but that means you're going to get less work done, which means you can't put as many workloads on it. You can massage the storage configuration, and so, at the end of the day, every customer's configuration, their hardware environment, their network, their workload parameters are all going to be different. And so, we had to pick something that was, credible and representative. And so, we talked to a bunch of folks to zero in on this kind of a configuration. And we did this work with DBbest, which is a SQL consultancy that does a lot of migration work for Microsoft. And they said that this configuration is actually better than they see many of their customers using, and is very credible in that respect. And of course, to get a really personalized, understanding, I'm company X and these are my workloads. What can I expect? Right? You need somebody like DBbest to come in and do a detailed assessment, and they have a lot of IP in a modeling solution that takes what they measure and, predicts what that target system will look like. We didn't want to get caught up in that, so we made some choices here.
Yeah, that's great. That context really helps a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
In that spirit, when we're going
look
through
ahead,
this, in that spirit, when we get to this kind of scenario, would you want to tell your sales rep like what to do? Like if the customer was just like Kenton was and kind of questioned the premise, is that something we should build into the communication that says, obviously everyone's scenario is different, you know, talk to your customer about, you know, what kind of configurations they have, you know, do you want to build that into the story, I guess?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Right. And in fact, in the white paper, we explicitly say, you know, that we made these choices
Sure.
and that every customer's environment varies, and every customer, you know, we recommend that customers get an assessment of their environment. And of course, our good friends at DBVAS would be happy to do that.
Cool.
And so, yeah, in our training, whether that's to, you know, to our own staff, we would certainly say exactly that, you know, direct people to DBVAS. Because at this point they understand our product and the value proposition, which was frankly a secondary goal of having them do that.
Sure.
You know, besides just doing the work, now they understand how to apply it.
Right.
For a channel partner, it depends on whether or not, you know, they offer the same kind of services. You know, then you wouldn't want to say, you know, slit your own throat and, you know, send that work elsewhere.
Right.
But, you know, at the end of the day, we're encouraging consumption of those kinds of services offerings because we don't want to get close to trying to model, you know, what every customer's environment looks like.
Of course. Gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here on this slide, this is where we get specific to that channel partner focus of this specific webinar. So, you know, up to this point, everything we've talked about, you could tell to a customer,
Yes.
to a channel partner, to our own sales organization, and you wouldn't need to change anything.
Mm-hmm.
This slide is specific to the channel partner. It says, okay, so that's good for your customer, but you just took $400,000, you know, off the table, you know, of an order you would have received. Why is this a good thing? And then we go into, you know, you can provide a solution that's going to be a better solution for your customer, and they're going to be happy about that. And then you redirect that savings to other things, you know, higher margin products and services. Because, I mean, everybody pays the same price for SQL Server, and the companies that resell those licenses don't make a lot of money on them. And if you could take $400,000 off the table on a low margin sale and redeploy it to a high margin sale, you're going to make a lot more money off of that. And as well, you know, every IT group has a list of projects they want to do and a budget that does not let them do them all.
Right.
And so if you've got a bunch of money left over, you can, you know, help them knock off some projects on that list they didn't think they can get to. You know, you're the hero.
Right. Right.
And you saved them a ton of money, you made IT's life better. Okay, but again, that's specifically a channel-focused message.
Got it.
I mean, frankly, for the customer, it's easy. You know, so for any of our folks talking to customers, save a bundle of money. You know, in fact, in the white paper, we talk about how the caching solution, for example, is $5,900. So you spend $6,000, you save $400,000. You know, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And I think we can even frame this part of the story. We wouldn't be so overt to make it obviously a channel story or any other for that matter. But I think we can just frame it in the context of, you know, this allows you know, IT organizations to redeploy resources to high priority projects and all that sort of things without getting into the particulars of the partner, since it needs to do double duty. So I think we can handle that.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So then there's several slides that are specific to Synex, which we wouldn't include in those other trainings. I think after that, there's just a wrap-up.
Cool. Hey, can I ask you a couple of questions, the group, whoever wants to answer these, around some of the context around the e-learning itself? Maybe you can give us an understanding of the likely scenario. When we do the e-learning, we sort of say, you know, this is ideal for this situation. For example, would this level of story be something that a sales rep would bring in an SC to talk through with the prospective customer? Would the rep be presenting this on his or her own? How do you see this level of technical information best presented?
That's a great question. So this is David. Let me just, first of all, Tricia, how long are these videos typically, from what you've been creating for Victoria, how long is a typical video?
Well, the overviews that we've been doing that are kind of broader, more solution-oriented are what, about 15 minutes?
15 minutes.
About 15 minutes. And they, they're
Okay.
chapterized type of thing. So, yeah.
So typically, there are two aspects of the deck that Peter walked you through.
Yes.
All of those discussions on the Microsoft features,
Yes.
always on availability groups, et cetera, that's typically going to be the SC that's having that conversation.
Okay.
But that conversation on the license savings that our Flash is now enabling the customer to experience, that's definitely going to be the AE. Now, the SC will also be part of that too, but the AE, that's a message that he or she is leading with.
Okay. Gotcha. So in terms of the sales training, you could imagine both your AEs and your SCs looking at this, kind of to get up to speed, right, on the SanDisk story vis-a-vis vis-a-vis the solution, and possibly even being in a customer meeting together then and presenting both the technical aspect and the business benefit.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, the SB would go in deeper when the customer said, okay, in my environment we have this, how does
Yeah.
that help me? And then they would dig into that.
Totally,
Yep.
gotcha. That's helpful, thank you. Good, great. Well, do you also, when you're, one of the things we also try to reference at least lightly in the training is, how, when a customer is a really good candidate for this conversation, now this feels a little obvious, right? I was assumed, so for example, in some of them, we don't know when we're doing the training whether, what OEM partner, right, that they're working with. But in this case, we know that these guys will be going into a Microsoft shop, probably someone who's considering migrating to this database, that sort of scenario. Is that the primary place you'd see them having this conversation?
Yeah, so I'll take that. So Peter again, one of the reasons we chose to do IO memory-based solutions is that IO memory has been qualified by all of our OEM partners. And so that means, whatever OEM the customer uses, these scenarios are applicable.
Okay.
Now, the FlashSoft caching software is only resold by about half of them. Does that sound right? That's my
Yeah,
guess, anyway.
yeah, maybe not quite half, but yeah.
Yeah, so I can think of, so Dell resells FlashSoft. I think Lenovo is about to, I think there's a couple others. So that middle curve, which uses the FlashSoft
Yes,
plus IO memory, that one's not as widely applicable.
okay.
But frankly, we don't make as much money on that scenario, I think, as we would if you stuffed a bunch of flash into the server.
Yeah. So would you prefer then that we avoid that gray line scenario and just paint the picture of, spinning disk versus the more optimized scenario that you show? The blue line, I think it was?
No, I'd still focus on
Okay.
both.
Okay.
Partly, to be honest, amongst the many ulterior motives here, we wanted to show the OEM partners who have not qualified and aren't reselling FlashSoft that they're missing the boat.
Oh, there you go.
And, so this is a little, create a little customer demand for that and show them that they really should be offering that.
Okay,
So yeah, I would continue to talk about both scenarios.
awesome, great. Great, I think we're a couple minutes over, just to quickly, do you have any other questions, Kenton, or?
At the
Are we
moment.
good? This was really great, Peter. Thank you so much for stepping us through it. And we'll look forward to getting the slides and reading all the color commentary below that we could see a little bit as you were toggling around. So that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and down the road, there'll be separate white papers on each of the three topics. The
Gotcha.
always on operational analytics and then this consolidation scenario. So they'll be more detailed than anybody wants.
Right, but that would be a good place to drive, say, the viewer of this, like, for more information, when those are available, we could suggest that they go check that stuff out, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
precisely, yeah. We'll
Great.
also have, a 2-page technical summary and things like that.
Sure.
So if you don't want the 30-page white paper, there's still something for you.
Okay, great, thank you so much. So Victoria, I'm
problem.
sure Tricia will circle around with you on timing and all this kind of the other details of this guy.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, we will.
All
And
right.
as soon as my system comes back, I will forward you the deck here. So
Okay.
Okay.
we should be good on that.
Thank you
Great,
so much.
thank you all.
Thanks.
All right,
Bye.
thanks guys.